February is Black History Month, dedicated to honoring African American history. And there is a lot of it in the Houston area. So in this KHOU 11 Plus special, we're celebrating the people, places, events, and foods of the Black community. Hi there, I'm digital anchor Brandy Smith. Let's start with why Black History Month is celebrated in February, the shortest month of the year. Xavier Walton explained.
Dating back to 1915, an organization was created to promote achievements by African Americans. It was called the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. Historian Carter G. Woodson and minister Jesse E. Moreland founded the group. 11 years later, so 1926, that group sponsored National Negro History Week, selecting the second week of February, coinciding with the birthdays of President Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and Douglass, leader of the abolitionist movement, also a famed anti-slavery author. For decades, cities nationwide recognized Negro History Week. By the late 1960s, that week multiplied to a month, thanks in part to the Civil Rights Movement. Then, in 1976, President Gerald Ford officially recognized February as Black History Month during a commemorative speech urging upon the public to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. It wouldn't be until 10 years later, following Ford's speech, so 1986 Congress passed a law deeming every February Black History Month.
Before we talk history, we have to give credit where credit is due. The people and organizations working to preserve African American history. Janelle Fort visited a library in Houston doing just that.
The African American Library at the Gregory School.
We're here to document the African Americans' experience of the past and today.
Sits tucked away just blocks from the busy bars in Midtown.
Our collection is made up of donated materials that we actually go out and negotiate with the community to for them to entrust us to preserve their history and our culture as well.
Built in the heart of Friedmen's Town, the community established by emancipated slaves, the library occupies what was once the first school for African American children in Houston.
This building we're standing in now was built in 1926. The city actually owned the building, and in 2009 it was sold to the Houston Public Library System.
Miguel Caesar manages operations.
African American history wasn't always documented. So the fact that the city saw it was a need to actually have a building and a monument to African American history, I feel like it is the community's responsibility to come see it.
Inside is more of a research facility than a community library. The first floor is made up of collections of artifacts, exhibits, and galleries.
So here you'll find a timeline that actually shows the development of African Americans in Houston. As you can see here in 1870, the Gregory Institute was actually started.
There's also a refurbished classroom, keeping the feel of the original architecture of the building.
The second floor is where we house our archival collections.
Right now, they're working to create the biggest repository of funeral programs.
It's just a great starting point to do research. So if you do have those, please donate those to the Gregory School.
For now, the pandemic is halting in-person programming and visits to the library, but you still have access online. And for this Black History Month, the library is doing a virtual 4-part series on the African American family to commemorate the month. Janelle Ford, KHOU 11 News.
Did you know the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum is the only museum in the United States dedicated to preserving the legacy and honor of African American soldiers, specifically the Buffalo Soldiers? The Buffalo Soldiers were 6 all-Black units created by the United States Army after the Civil War. The museum houses the largest repository of African American military history in the world. Just as Black History Month wrapped up in 2022, 3 Houston landmarks received international recognition. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, better known as UNESCO, added the Jack Yates House, the Kellum Noble House, and the Fourth Ward Cottage to its Slave Route project. All 3 of the homes have direct ties to former slaves and are currently being preserved at Sam Houston Park. UNESCO launched its initiative in 1994 to make sure the forced migration of Africans would never be erased from history. Students at HISD's Fur High School learned about and embraced Black history. In 2021, Jason Miles looked at the stories and figures those students studied.
A Houston ISD school with a majority Hispanic student body is embracing Black History Month.
One thing that I love about my students is that they are open and wanting to learn about the Black culture and the Black community and Black history.
Fur High School teacher Shira Moody and several students spoke with me about what they've been doing.
And they are, very open to expressing what they've learned and talking about what they've learned and how it affects them today.
Senior Hilario Freire recently submitted this project on Tulsa, Oklahoma's Black Wall Street Massacre, during which white mobs killed hundreds of African Americans and burned an entire Black district to the ground. It happened 100 years ago this May.
Obviously, I've learned about people like George Washington Carver, MLK, Rosa Parks, but something like the Black Wall Street Massacre was something that I really only ever heard of once, but even then I wasn't taught it. I didn't know the specific details.
George Washington Carver, the iconic agricultural scientist responsible for innumerable breakthroughs, was the focus of freshman Vanessa Cruz's Black History Month project, creatively assembled through Adobe Spark.
I wanted to know more about him because even when I was little, I would only hear about him doing peanut butter, inventing that. So I wanted to know more about him.
Many of us know about the infamous 1964 murders of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi thanks to movies and TV. It spoke to Fur freshman Joseph Gomez.
I wish George were here to see this right now.
Who believes historical discussions help better understand current events and similar struggles within different cultures.
Learning about Black history and racial injustice, and I'm pretty sure we can make a movement into the next generation and trying to make that better.
A generation about which these students' teacher is very optimistic.
One of the things that we focus on here at FUR is giving our students a voice.
In Houston, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
Hopefully you got a chance to check out never-before-seen images of a young civil rights activist while they were on display at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. The exhibit showcased photographs of Stokely Carmichael taken by Life magazine photographer Gordon Parks back in 1967. Anna Yeli Ruiz shared the importance of that display.
I said, I can walk there. He said, just walk the hell out.
It's an incredible collection of never-before-seen black and white photographs of the first Black staffer for Life magazine, Gordon Parks.
Seeing all these images gives you a better impression of what Parks saw and what an amazing photographer he was.
The exhibit, called Gordon Parks, Stokely Carmichael, and Black Power, is about a 1967 Life magazine article where photographer Gordon Parks published images and a profile of Stokely Carmichael, a young civil rights leader. And to publish the article, Gordon traveled with Carmichael for months, snapping nearly 700 pictures.
Only 5 appeared, the rest went into an archive.
And now those images are up on display, highlighting issues still being faced today.
You'll see Carmichael fighting for voter registration and voter rights in Lowndes County, Alabama. We know that we are still fighting for equality of voting rights and fair districting today.
Not only black folk, but the nation.
And for people like Dr. James Thomas Jones III, seeing this exhibit is very surreal.
As a person who came up within the Black Studies movement, these are the guys that really started the entire movement that I dedicated my career to. It's amazing to have.
Well, this exhibit also has ties to our city. Carmichael and Parks both visited Houston and had speeches here. Those are also part of the display.
This is a chance for people to really look back about 60 plus years, and deal with the idea of race and power, things that are still hitting us to this very day.
The exhibit closed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 16th, 2023. In 2018, a construction crew building a new Fort Bend ISD school in Sugar Land discovered 95 graves. The remains belong to prisoners used for their labor during the state's convict lease period, a continuation of slavery after the Civil War. In 2022, Matt Doherty showed us how those behind the Sugar Land 95 project are getting closer to connecting the remains with names.
Within the boundaries of a chain rope on the grounds of a technical school in Sugar Land lie the bodies of 94 men and 1 woman.
Because it allows us to shed light on a much larger part of a lesser known point in history.
Inside the James Reese Career and Technical Center, a new exhibit which tells a story that until 4 years ago received little attention.
This is history unfolding.
When the Civil War ended and slaves were freed, the plantation system was ruined. Without free labor to work the sugarcane fields of Fort Bend County, a new plan was devised wherein Texas prisoners were forced to work the land, rented to the cash crop farms. The majority of the convict laborers were black, and many of them had been convicted of committing questionable, if not totally fabricated, crimes.
The leg was amputated in the field. We'll look at the next one.
Life on the prison farms was brutal, and many of the prisoners died not long after they arrived.
And if you see the stripes on that bone, you can see that those are actually the cut marks from the saw.
Researchers with the Sugarland 95 project are matching the remains with old Texas prison records. This one is a likely match. 60-year-old Sebi Frosch was convicted in Washington County of theft and sentenced to work on the prison farm. In April of 1882, he escaped, but was recaptured. Prison records show Frosch died a few months later from an infection after his leg was amputated.
Those are the pieces of metal from a bullet or a buckshot.
The researchers have learned he was wounded by a shotgun as well. Although the remains are likely those of Sebi Frosch, it can't be confirmed without DNA testing. That's the next step.
Individuals who think they may be related can contact us here in the district, and we put them in touch.
DNA testing for remains that are centuries old takes a long time, and it's expensive. Fort Bend ISD says DNA profiles for 10 of the remains should be ready sometime this spring. It'll take the project one step closer to finally giving these unmarked, forgotten graves headstones. Headstones with names. In Sugarland, I'm Matt Doherty, KHOU 11 News.
In March 2022, Fort Bend ISD opened the Sugarland 95 exhibit for public tours. We have information about hours and a digital exhibit guide on KHOU.com. For 50 years in Texas, there were two different high school football leagues, one white and one black. Whites played on Friday. We all know the phrase Friday Night Lights. Blacks, though, mostly played on Thursdays. Len Cannon looked at the legacy of Thursday Night Lights.
They were Texas high school legends, and many became legendary pros. Otis Taylor from Houston's Worthing High won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Cliff Branch, another Worthing grad, won 3 Super Bowls with the Raiders. They started their high school careers in the Prairie View Interscholastic League, or PVIL, and mostly played on Thursday nights.
We'd have a big pep rally in the auditoriums. Everybody's all hyped to go to the ball game.
Houston native Michael Hurd, a sports writer and historian, is the author of Thursday Night Lights, the story of black high school football in Texas.
It was kind of like falling off a log because I knew that story and I knew that history.
A story that had never been told. In 1920, the Colored Teachers State Association of Texas founded a league providing athletics and academic competitions for black schools because segregation ruled, separate and unequal.
They would get not only hand-me-down uniforms and equipment from the white schools, but even some of the jockstraps, used jockstraps. Imagine that.
Fewer resources, but an abundance of talent. This is rare footage of Worthing High playing Yates in 1958 at Jefferson Stadium in 3rd Ward. It's where all the black schools played in Houston. And the game of the year was on Thanksgiving, the Turkey Day Classic.
At one time, it was the largest draw for a high school event in the country because they would draw crowds up to 30, 40,000 at Jefferson Stadium, standing room only.
And it was at Jefferson Stadium where a 15-year-old Carl Douglas got his first start at quarterback for Worthing.
Coach Williams had put the starting lineup, and beside quarterback, he had Douglas.
You didn't expect that?
Nobody ever told me that.
Douglas went on to become a college All-American at then Texas A&I in Kingsville and was drafted by the Baltimore Colts in 1971.
You were drafted by the Baltimore Colts?
I was.
They had a guy named Johnny Unitas at quarterback.
Yes, they did.
Do you think you got a fair shot?
Truth be told, no.
Back then, the league reluctant to give black quarterbacks starting jobs, often switching them to running back or receiver. Douglas played 7 seasons for the Colts, in the Canadian League, and the Oilers. he refused to play anything but quarterback.
My mom and dad always taught me that you're just as good as anybody else, and don't let anybody ever tell you different. And so I took that to heart.
Just 3 years before Douglas was drafted is the cautionary tale of another Houston quarterback. His play at Booker T. Washington High School was legendary. He was Douglas's idol. His name was Eldridge Dickey.
How good was Eldridge Dickey?
Is the camera rolling?
Yes, the camera is rolling.
The camera is rolling. You see me smiling? They have a country and western song out now called Smooth as Tennessee Whiskey.
Yes.
Eldridge was so smooth. I mean, it was like,
An unbelievable talent, and says Douglas, a showman.
He walked up to the line. He said, "Good evening, line." What? Did I hear what I just heard? He went to Tennessee State and they called him the Lord's Prayer, because that's what you're supposed to say when you get ready to play Tennessee State and Eldridge Dickey.
Dickey was the first black quarterback drafted in the first round, taken by the Oakland Raiders in 1968. He had it all: speed, a rocket arm, and a high IQ. But he was the wrong color. The Raiders switched him to wide receiver. He never played quarterback again.
So I really didn't give a lot of thought to playing the white schools.
Rufus Cormier played fullback at Hebert High School in Beaumont and was one of the first black players recruited by SMU in 1966. He was a good football player, but a better student. He went on to Yale Law School and in 1981 became the first black law partner at a large Texas firm in Houston. He says football and the movement launched him.
It provided a pathway into the American mainstream, and I am so indebted to those activists who engaged in the civil rights movement.
In 1967, 13 years after the Supreme Court ruled segregation in public schools was unconstitutional, players from the legendary PVIL were starting to integrate. And by 1970, the league, where so many dreams were realized and careers made on and off the field, was no more.
Black cowboys have a rich history, but their stories often go untold. Brittany Ford introduced us to a man working to change that.
At the corner of 3rd Street in downtown Rosenberg sits decades of black history. Through the doors,
My name is Larry Callis. I am a black cowboy.
a man who's made it his mission to educate the world on what it means to be a black cowboy.
By the time I turned 7 or 8, I was riding horses and working cows with my dad.
Callis started rodeo riding when he was just 15 years old, the second black cowboy competing, aside from his cousin Tex.
He was the first black to win an all-white rodeo in 1967. I was the second to make the state finals.
He says working at the Simonton Rodeo is where he discovered another talent. As a country music singer,
George Strait's manager was my manager at one time, until I lost my voice.
What is your biggest accomplishment as a black cowboy?
My biggest accomplishment is this museum.
with the motto,
I'm a Christian first and I'm a cowboy second.
Among the artifacts, articles, and pictures hung on the walls, Callis's longtime friend.
My name is David Solomon, but I was the first black that ever rode in a high school rodeo.
Solomon, a retired professional bull rider who fought the struggles of being a colored rider in the 1960s.
Although you rode a good bull, you didn't win nothing.
One thing I think is interesting too, as being a black rider myself, I feel like it's taboo for you to say that you ride horses or that you're in equestrian or a cowboy. Why do you think that is?
That's just the way it was. They didn't put us on TV, so they don't know anything about us.
The real history.
The real history.
Not knowing the history behind the word cowboy.
Because a white man could be 20 years old and a black man could be 55, and they say, hey boy, go get that cow.
Callis says historically white men were cow hands, slaves cowboys, until the early 1920s where Hollywood through Western film and radio took on the term.
I ain't no cowhand, I'm a cowboy, just like I see on TV. That's what changed.
Fast forward decades later.
There are black cowboys and African Americans that are able now to be awarded for their talent, awarded for that. I mean, what does that mean to you to see just it come full circle?
Well, I never thought it was going to happen, but it's happened.
Callis and Solomon, true trailblazers.
The black cowboys were the first cowboys.
Brittany Ford, KHOU 11 News.
Now let's celebrate some firsts. Barbara Jordan made history not only as the first black woman from the South to be elected to the House of Representatives, but she was also the first LGBTQ+ woman in Congress. Although she never publicly mentioned her sexual orientation, Jordan made no secret of her life companion, Nancy Earl. As Jordan's health declined, Earl became her main caregiver until Jordan's death in 1996. The first African-American elected to the Houston City Council, that is Judson Robinson Jr., elected in 1971. He pushed for economic development in lower-income neighborhoods and advocated for hiring more minorities in the city's police and fire departments. He also served as mayor pro tem twice during his 19 years on council. An HISD school is named after him. The first black officer joined the Houston Police Department in 1948, decades before Robinson was elected. When he retired after 63 years, Edward A. Thomas was the longest-serving officer in HPD history. In 2015, the City Council named HPD's Travis Street headquarters after Thomas. Now meet a man who dedicated 50 years of his life to educating African-American students. Mia Gradney traveled to Galveston to learn more about him and the state's first high school for black students.
John Rufus Gibson, an unsung hero of early educators, a legacy often overlooked, but not lost on people like a longtime Galveston School Board trustee, David O'Neill Jr.
You still can't forget the significance of the impact of the individuals before you.
From 1888 to 1935, Gibson served as the principal of Galveston Central High School, the first public high school for black students west of the Mississippi River.
Most students, people were going to school, it was to the 8th grade. So going to a school like Central, it was like going to a college.
The original permanent structure was stately and elegant, much like the man who quickly rose to school principal after just 3 short years of teaching.
So many people came from near and far to go to school here. All of the rural areas, Brazoria, Sweeney, Bay City, Louisiana, it was just an easy access to them to come here. And Houston was rural. The first high school for Houston, I believe, was Booker Washington, and it was 1926.
Gibson was a graduate of Wilberforce University, the nation's oldest private historically black university, before relocating to Galveston. By 1905, he managed the then new colored branch of Galveston's Rosenberg Library, while also heading up Central High and its evolution through the years. Gibson's impact and influence extends way beyond Central and Galveston, Texas. In 1901, President McKinley appointed Gibson Consul General of Liberia, a West African nation that then had mission schools and even a teacher's college. But by far, his greatest contribution and lasting legacy was at the head of the class, says historian Sam Collins.
There are children and adults still being impacted by his work.
We need more men, specifically men of color, to help educate young people.
Men who will serve the classroom and their community, all while encouraging the next generation and carrying on the legacy of John Rufus Gibson.
A graduate of Wheatley High School in Houston, Ruth Simmons became the first black president of an Ivy League school and the first female president when she took office at Brown University in 2001. She now serves as president of Prairie View A&M University, which she'll hold through the end of the 2022-23 school year before transitioning to the role of president emerita. More on Prairie View shortly. Have you ever heard of C.F. Richardson? He blazed a trail in journalism, starting in 1919 when he founded and became editor of the Houston Informer, one of the city's oldest black newspapers. In 1930, he also founded and was editor of the Houston Defender, another black newspaper that is still in business today. Another first, Henrietta Wells, who was the first female member of the 1930 debate team at Wiley College in Wiley, Texas. The team was the subject of the award-winning movie The Great Debaters, starring Denzel Washington. Henrietta also became the first black teacher at Bonner Elementary School in Houston. One is a trailblazing ballerina. The other develops programs for aspiring dancers. Together, these two women created a powerful partnership, highlighted by Len Cannon.
3 to the front, 2, 3, up, down. I just want them to feel okay and comfortable enough to do it again and to do it again. And then I want them to be successful.
The master is now the teacher.
And the 1, and 2, and
Former ballerina Lauren Anderson is training the next generation of dancers.
2, and 3, up, down. I love teaching. Teaching's my jam. I love teaching just as much as I love performing, because when the light bulb goes on in a child, when you see it happen, it's like, yay, and it's not my victory, it's their victory.
Anderson has had her share of victories. A trailblazing career with Houston Ballet. She was one of the first African-American principal ballerinas for a major U.S. company. She retired in 2006, but teaching keeps her close to her first love. Dance, she says, has been her refuge through good times and bad.
I've crossed over, been up, down, forward, back with dance. Dance is a one thing that no matter what has happened in life, because life happens. Everything is not always a bowl of cherries, but dance has always been there for me.
We caught up with her at the Fort Bend Academy of Arts and Dance in Missouri City, founded by Charity Carter. Carter grew up dancing and calls Anderson her role model. Carter founded the nonprofit Edison Foundation, which provides cultural education like this for children. Now the two women are working together to spread the power of dance.
That power that dance gives them is the power that takes them to do whatever they want to do and whatever they can do. The sky is the limit.
Run a jambe on there, close back.
These two women, the master and the visionary, have a special partnership and a commitment.
I'm constantly looking at these dancers that I teach. Who can I get to come to Houston Ballet and give a scholarship to? And everyone says, yes, you're looking for the new you. No, I'm looking for the better me. Yes. Better than me, that child.
Charity Carter's Edison Arts Foundation is building a new 400-seat cultural and performing arts center in Missouri City. It is slated to open this fall, and Lauren will be teaching there. The neon lights of Broadway shine bright for a Houston student called up to play the leading role in The Phantom of the Opera. Lauren Tallarico talked to Kanisha Feliciano about her journey and how she made history along the way.
From Rice University to starring on Broadway.
Amazing, incredible, felt like a fever dream.
It's been quite the summer for Kanisha Feliciano. The opera singer moved to Houston in 2017 to study music, first at the University of Houston and then at Rice.
I was scrolling through Facebook one day and I saw that Phantom had placed this kind of like open cattle call.
So
I recorded Think of Me and sent it in. I got a call back and then another call back, and then they flew me to New York.
She was so close to getting that leading role in the longest running Broadway show ever, but in the end, the answer was no. Instead, it went to
Emily KHOU, and she was the first Black woman to play it on Broadway.
But Kanisha kept in touch.
And I told them, please, please, please keep me in mind for the future.
In April, Phantom did call, offering her a role in the cast and to understudy for Christine Daae. Then, last week, her big moment.
I was about to go on for rehearsal, and the directors came in and said, just so you know, you are going on as Christine tonight.
It was a whirlwind.
The moment that it sunk in was her second song, Wishing You Were Somehow. And this is in Act 2. And at the end, I got through it and I just started sobbing.
That night, KHOU also made history, becoming the first Latina to perform that role on Broadway.
How does that feel to have that ownership? It feels surreal. That is a part of who I am, being Black, being Latina. It's so important for people to see themselves.
KHOU won't be returning to Rice this fall, as she's staying on with Phantom. But no matter how high she flies on Broadway, Houston will always be part of this star.
KHOU's final performance as Christine is scheduled for February 22nd, 2023. No word what's next for her or whether she'll return to Rice now that the Phantom's run on Broadway is coming to an end. We want to recognize the musical contributions of one of the all-time great bluesmen, Houston's own Sam "Lightnin' Hopkins. From his incredible guitar playing to his uncanny ability to connect with his audience, one thing is for sure, there will never be another Lightnin'. And hailing from Houston, Yolanda Adams is a 5-time Grammy Award winner who was named Billboard Magazine's Gospel Artist of the Decade. Recently, she sang Hallelujah at President Biden's COVID-19 memorial service. Firsts aren't just found in the history books, new ones are being recorded every day. Xavier Walton was there as a milestone was reached in Hempstead.
All in favor?
Monday night,
All opposed?
Erica Gillum
Motion carries for an extension.
became the first Black female mayor of Hempstead.
It's a lot to take in.
She's making history.
It hasn't sunk in quite yet.
In Hempstead, history has a way of repeating itself. This is a photo from April 1984, when the first Black mayor was sworn in, Mayor Leroy Singleton.
It had its ups and downs. When you're dealing with personalities and you're dealing with racism, it's a new animal out there.
Mayor Singleton was at the meeting Monday to pass on the baton to Mayor Gillum.
It's an honor to have that legacy, to carry that forward.
A legacy that runs in the family.
She's just like me.
You see, Mayor Singleton is Mayor Erica Gillum's dad. 38 years ago, she watched her father become Hempstead's first Black mayor. And on Monday, Mayor Singleton watched his daughter follow in his footsteps.
That moment when my dad actually walked me through my oath, that was amazing. I don't know, I'll probably take that with me forever and beyond. That was such an honor to have him here at this very moment, for this to actually take place. That's the biggest honor that I have, because he's my biggest coach.
In Hempstead, Xavier Walton, KHOU 11 News.
When NASA named Vanessa Weish director of the Johnson Space Center, that made history. She's the first African-American woman to lead a NASA center. We're going to dig into her background more in just a few minutes. How about A.E. Warner, who will go down in history as the first Black licensed new car salesman in Houston. Warner was so good, his work was recognized and documented in national headlines. Now, national headlines definitely weren't part of Houstonian Brittany Winter's 2022 plans, but she got them. Rekha Mudaraj showed us how.
That was just such an amazing opportunity.
This was one of the biggest moments for Brittany Winters, superstar Mary J. Blige wearing one of her products on the Super Bowl stage.
I'm such a huge fan of her, so to just see her up there like in something that was a part of a company that I created, it was a dream come true.
A full circle moment for this Third Ward native.
My great-grandmother raised me until I was about 12 years old. She passed away from breast cancer.
Brittany says she bounced around for years, living with different relatives.
At times, my home life wasn't so stable. I wanted that almost distraction.
Brittany excelled in academics at Booker T. Washington, the magnet high school for engineering professions, where her favorite teacher encouraged her to apply to Stanford University.
Not always the goal, but once I found out about it, it became the goal. I saw the pictures of those palm trees and I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be.
She studied engineering, but after graduating from Stanford, worked in finance for a few years before she was accepted to Harvard Business School.
I was just spending so much time and money on hair.
It was in Boston where she got the idea for her business.
I was struggling to find a stylist, and so me and some of the other Black female students, we started taking day trips to New York City to get our hair done. And I was like, on one of those trips, because we're riding the bus, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, there has to be a better way to do this.
Her engineering background and business acumen led to Upgrade Boutique, the digital solution for those wanting customized, high-quality wigs and hair extensions.
What type of wig, the texture, the length, the cap size. We are providing the wig. Once you choose a stylist, they color it and customize it to your specification.
Just a few months ago, Brittany opened her flagship store a few blocks from where she grew up. Her motivation? Her daughter.
I want her to have a head start in life. I don't want her to have to work as hard as I did and overcome some of the struggles that I went through.
She also encourages other young girls to seek out a STEM education.
STEM is a great choice. Even if you don't ultimately want to be a mathematician or an engineer, there are certain skills that you learn in STEM, just critical thinking skills. I come from a STEM background and now I'm an entrepreneur in the beauty sector. I mean, you know, who would imagine?
Winter says being an online business, she has customers from all over the world and other celebrity clients, including Taraji P. Henson. That's why she's setting her sights on Los Angeles for a second storefront. An A-Leaf native who signed with the Texans says he felt like he had to do something to give back to the city's youth. Daniel Gutera revealed how he did it.
Head up, look up, look up. This morning, Lovie Smith watched his Texans players
I need y'all to spin it.
be the coaches. The guy in charge of this youth camp today in A-Leaf, very familiar with the stadium it was held in.
I haven't been back here since I played here, so you know, just to be back here, see everything, see the changes, it's been really real cool.
Texans linebacker Obo Okoronkwo played at A-Leaf Taylor. This was his first camp in his hometown.
When I got home, about a week being home, I knew I wanted to do a camp. You know, I was just home in the city, and I was just seeing how the city embraced me. I wanted to be able to do something for the city also, as well.
A bunch of his Texans teammates showed up to support him. One of them,
Drive, ball.
fellow Houstonian Ross Blacklock.
It feels like family. Like everybody that's came in is just like molded in with everybody. The relationships are good. Everybody's getting along. Different guys, different positions, hanging out with each other. Just everybody's pretty much bonding well.
Being out here showing his support, it means the world to me. You know, also likewise with my teammates, just them coming out here, it's just a testament. It shows how close we are and how tightly knit we've been building.
This whole thing's surreal for Obo, who hopes this family atmosphere with the Texans pays off in the fall.
It's really special, you know. I feel like just being able to give back, you know, that's really important. I feel like it's a trend that needs to catch on. You know, it's all about the kids in the community. You know, they're our future. I feel like I feel really comfortable here. You know, the city's been showing a lot of love, and I want to be able to just show that love back to the city.
In A-Leaf, Daniel Gutera, KHOU, 11 Sports.
Okoronkwo also helped out at the NFL's first training camp in Africa. That's really just a handful of people we could mention. But now we're going to talk places. 150 years ago, Houston's Third Ward was born. It's been called the cradle of Houston's civil rights movement because Black college students sat down at a segregated Third Ward lunch counter to first protest discriminatory policies in 1960. Sociologists note that the area, which has a rich history and legacy, has been predominantly African American since the 1930s. But it got its start in 1872. When a group of Black Americans, led by Jack Yates, raised $800 to buy 4 acres of land in the Third Ward. That property became Emancipation Park, the oldest public park in Houston. During segregation, it was the only public park that Black Houstonians could visit. The park also commemorates Juneteenth, which is the day General Gordon Granger brought news of the Emancipation Proclamation to Galveston on June 19, 1865, 2.5 years after the proclamation was signed. Just a quick note, you can watch KHOU 11's award-winning documentaries about Juneteenth wherever you're watching this, on our KHOU 11 Plus apps, on Roku and Fire TV, on KHOU.com, or on our KHOU 11 YouTube channel. Along with Emancipation Park, Third Ward is home to Texas Southern University, dozens of prominent Black churches, and the El Dorado Ballroom, one of the country's musical epicenters. It was built in 1939. The El Dorado hosted countless blues and jazz performances by famed artists like B.B. King. Xavier Walton gave us a look at renovation plans for this iconic venue.
As the kids say, it's about to glow up.
If the walls could talk, you'd hear historic voices like Ray Charles, Duke Ellington, and...
Now if you want me to love you, you gotta love me too.
Houston's own Jewel Brown.
Oh my goodness, it's like the floors was just... It was really something else. And the windows back in the day, they pushed out from the bottom.
She performed with the likes of Louis Armstrong.
And now it's time for our vocalists to come up and entertain you. Here she comes, Jewel Brown, right here.
People would be all across the street at Emancipation Park standing out there because you could hear everything.
This is where Brown began her storied career. Along with the who's who of the international jazz and blues community, she walked up these same exact stairs and sang.
Elvis Presley used to come over here, and this was his after party, and they would just sing gospel songs until the sun rose. It was like his favorite place to be. True story.
Eureka Gilkey is the executive director of Project Row Houses. That's a community group that raised some $9.6 million to restore a pillar of Houston's historic music scene.
The El Dorado Ballroom represents the heart and soul of Third Ward.
In its heyday, this place was way more than a world-renowned social club. Teenagers took to the stage for talent shows. High schoolers danced at Saturday night sock hops. Families celebrated birthdays. The El Dorado Ballroom was a cultural institution.
Even my aunts and uncles talk about coming here.
It closed in the early 70s, leaving a hole in the heart of Third Ward for years. Then in 1999, it was donated to Project Row Houses. And now, in 2022...
People are really excited about this project.
Here's the progress to preserve, protect, and restore a creative space that means more than music. When done, it'll once again be a music hall, hosting performances and special events for the community.
Culture of this city is not overlooked or forgotten. It's being preserved. That it's a space that says that what we, who we are and what we have done on behalf of the city is important. And it tells the story of what Houston was, what it is, and what it can be.
Reno work is ongoing. Now to another important venue, the Ensemble Theater, founded by George Hawkins in 1976. Len Cannon went on stage in 2020 to see how the players connect with the audience.
All the pain and beauty and blood and magic and rage them slaves went through.
The Ensemble Theater wants to do more than entertain you.
When you sit in the audience, what is it you want the audience to get from what you put on this stage?
We should be taken away for a moment. You know, when you're sitting in the seats in the theater, you should be swept away.
Take me to
the theater has been sweeping audiences away for 44 years. Founded in 1976 by George Hawkins, it is now one of the premier theaters in the country, telling stories from an African-American perspective, with universal themes everyone can relate to. The stories being told here may be universal, but Black audiences are unique. When they hear something that resonates with them, they let you know.
We're a call and response community. So that means that when people hear something that touches their soul, they'll make a or yeah, or some kind of little sound, or they may make a motion or something because it touches some part of them.
And I came tonight looking my best just for you, sweet Sarah.
Morris calls it the richness and deliciousness of the art. And the Ensemble Theater wants you to feel it through dramas, comedies, and musicals.
You can find out which productions are being performed at the ensemble via the link on KHOU.com. Friedmanstown is another historic Houston neighborhood established by newly freed slaves. In 1865, they purchased the land and created part of the vibrant community we now know today as Fourth Ward. Jason Miles explained how the city is working to preserve the neighborhood's history.
In the shadow of downtown Houston's modern skyline, parts of Friedmanstown remain a touchstone to the past. Historical sites already dot the neighborhood, and now a new designation will help further preserve, maintain, and highlight its history.
What a way to celebrate Juneteenth, right?
Zion Escobar is executive director of the Houston Friedmanstown Conservancy.
Once people received news of their emancipation, they migrated from Brazoria County and Galveston and all sorts of areas south of here, migrated up towards Friedmanstown to live their liberated and free lives, to own their freedom.
The Conservancy is among the groups that pushed the City Council to pass an ordinance making Friedmanstown its very first heritage district. Unlike historic designations that help protect buildings or other structures from demolition, this allows for the protection, restoration, or installation of things in the city's public right-of-way, like walkways, signage, markers, and public art.
And we have other efforts going on to secure the future for private properties and homeowners who see that as something that they desire.
Repairing and restoring the area's landmark brick streets will be the focus of the Conservancy's first fundraiser. Perhaps the most tangible connection to the history of Friedmanstown, they were laid by hand by the descendants of its founders when the city refused to pave the streets.
This is a watershed moment for Houston to finally start acknowledging its history and its heritage.
One that includes an area no longer overlooked.
What was an iconic church in Friedmanstown is now a different kind of sacred space. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic.
It was an opportunity to kind of like quiet your mind, stay within this path that has one way in and one way out.
Kind of like life, in that it has its twists and turns, and it might not be a path you expect or a path that you were thinking of following.
Like its winding path, the Friedmanstown Labyrinth has a story you might not expect. For nearly 100 years, it was the site of the Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church.
10 years ago, the church collapsed.
Forced to find a new home, the congregation still wanted to celebrate its longtime place of prayer.
I work on large-scale murals, so I wasn't afraid of size.
In the footprint of the 10,000 square foot church, Reginald Adams designed a labyrinth using the bricks that remained to line its path.
I remember working in the sun on weekends, moving gravel, laying down bricks, all of that.
Ellis Owens, then in middle school, helped with design and construction as part of the group Sacred Sites Quest, a nonprofit service group focused on cultural, social, and creative awareness.
It's really pretty awesome.
When I saw how this labyrinth began to transform this community and the effect it was having on the young people that I was working with I was like, this needs to be a part of my work, and it has been since then.
On beaches, at retreats, in parks, using light or leaves, even donated food.
Every labyrinth kind of serves its own unique purpose based on the community and the people that it will serve.
This one celebrates the legacy of the neighborhood and the church that once stood here.
It's here until other forces say otherwise.
Olivewood Cemetery is Houston's first incorporated African-American cemetery and one of the oldest in the city. Olivewood is the final resting place of about 4,000 African-American Houstonians, including freed slaves who came to Houston seeking opportunities. Established in 1876, Prairie View A&M University is the second oldest public institution of higher education in Texas. It was also the first state-supported college in Texas for African Americans. Today, the university's enrollment exceeds 8,000 students coming from all over the world. Texas Southern University was born in the summer of 1927 as the Colored Junior College. Today, it's one of the nation's largest historically black universities with more than 100 undergraduate and graduate programs. TSU is proud of its extensive alumni network that includes educators, entrepreneurs, public servants, lawyers, pilots, artists, and future space scientists. Kim Davis broke down the new Space Act Agreement, a partnership between TSU and NASA.
Texas Southern University is one of only 12 historically black colleges and universities to have its Research 2 classification. That classification means the university has high research activity, which sparked NASA's interest. Last month, TSU and NASA signed a Space Act agreement that will allow them to work together on research, technology development, and education.
One of the largest things is the NASA Technology and Fusion Road Tour, which will be hosted by Texas Southern in September.
To do this at Texas Southern is really an honor. And it's an honor because it affords our students the opportunity to showcase their talents and abilities. The collaboration with NASA and Texas Southern University allows students of color to be represented at NASA.
The Space Act is a 5-year agreement. Through the partnership, students and faculty will be afforded internships, grants, and contract opportunities, among making history.
They will be part of the projects that will land the first woman on the moon, the first person of color on the moon. They will be the ones that will create the new spacesuits. This is why we created this agreement.
We mentioned Vanessa Weish a few minutes ago because she is the first black woman to lead a NASA center. Rekha Mudaraj shared what else we should know about the Johnson Space Center director.
When I got the call from the administrator, I told him, yes, sir, I'm thrilled and honored to have the job. And then I also let him know that I had to not squeal because I didn't want everyone to be alarmed.
31 years with NASA has brought Vanessa Weish to this moment. She is the first African-American woman to be named director of Johnson Space Center and now leads more than 10,000 employees of the agency. But breaking barriers has always been a part of Weich's life. As she explains during an interview with KHOU in 2020, she grew up in the Deep South and was the first person in her family to go through all integrated schools.
I, as a little girl and growing up in South Carolina, really did not think that I would ever work at NASA.
Weish landed a job at NASA in 1989.
I began my career building small payloads, doing experiments on astronauts.
Now she's looking forward to the exciting tasks ahead, NASA's partnership with SpaceX and helping Boeing get ready for its next crewless test flight.
The other big activity that we've been working on here in our local area supports what we're talking about is commercialization of low Earth orbit, right? So having the ability for commercial industry to build their own free-flying space stations, to do research on board the International Space Station, as well as flying private astronauts to the International Space Station.
Adding to the list, developing the Orion spacecraft and going to the moon. But even as she makes history herself, Weish is always looking to the future of NASA.
I want all young people to, pursue a career in STEM because I want them to come and work at the Johnson Space Center.
Rekha Mudaraj, KHOU 11 News.
In 2022, Jessica Watkins became the first black woman to have an extended mission on the International Space Station. Xavier Walton visited Meadows Elementary School to talk with some local kids about it.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
As Crew 4 rocketed into space,
who did we learn about today, friends?
These fourth graders were sending messages from Earth. Using colored pencils, markers, and scissors, students at Meadows Elementary watched history.
She's brave. I don't really know how to explain it, but altogether it was amazing.
I think it was pretty cool.
She's going to be the first black woman to go to the International Space Station.
Watkins will be carrying out a months-long mission on the ISS. She's also part of NASA's Artemis program, with hopes to return astronauts to the moon.
She's really brave to do that because I will be extremely scared.
So you don't want to go to space?
No.
But you love science.
Yes.
Do you want to be an astronaut?
No.
It didn't take long to figure out some of these little girls are afraid of heights. But after watching Watkins Wednesday, they're motivated to reach for the stars.
It feels like amazing that somebody with color actually has a chance to do that type of stuff, because years ago that was not ever possible.
She's inspiring because she's a woman that's doing it and she's black. Actually become an astronaut as a black woman, not caring what other people thought of her or not being ashamed. It makes me proud.
Why does it make you proud?
Because in the past, women didn't really have many rights, and especially women of color.
Proud.
Jessica Watkins.
Inspirational.
I really look up to her because she's like very amazing.
And raising the bar higher than ever before.
To never give up and achieve all of your goals if you could.
In Fort Bend County, Xavier Walton, KHOU 11 News.
The crew of Expedition 67 traveled 72 million miles and completed 2,700 Earth orbits during their 6 months in space. They returned to Earth in October 2022. And NASA expects to put the first person of color on the moon as part of the Artemis missions. That started with Artemis 1, which successfully sent an unmanned spacecraft traveling around the moon last fall. Artemis 2, which will be manned, is slated for late 2024. Looking beyond February, mark your calendar because Houston Black Restaurant Weeks kicks off on April 1st. For 10 days, local restaurants highlight and celebrate African-American cuisine with special deals for customers. Sherman Chow visited one of those restaurants last year.
The Greasy Spoon has opened up 2 locations and a food truck all since COVID. And COVID wasn't even the hardest part for the owner. One look at the food and you can see why this place is so popular.
2 sides of the cabbage. Boy, that looks good.
The regulars have their favorites.
Vegetable plate.
The rosemary lamb chops.
The Opelousas catfish.
Fried lobster tail.
Owner Max Bozeman II calls his place a soul food bistro.
Soul food is basically what the words say, you know, it's food for the soul. Most people eat soul food and they have to go take a nap afterwards, you know. They're able to feel the love that you're putting into it.
And there's no holding back on the love or the calories.
It's smothered in 40-weight gravy, as we call it.
But the chef's choice? The Boss Seafood Stack.
Collard greens, dirty rice, Cajun fried catfish, Cajun fried lobster tail, sauteed shrimp, and it's all smothered in a lump crab meat sauce.
The Greasy Spoon is one of 100 Houston area businesses participating in Black Restaurant Week.
To represent the culture of Southern cuisine, just to celebrate Black culinary excellence.
But what Max celebrates most is the return of his health.
So I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer actually a few months after I opened the Greasy Spoon. I'll be celebrating my 1-year anniversary from ringing the bell this June.
All right, Black Restaurant Week runs until April the 10th. Every participating eatery will give you a special of some kind. Maybe it's a discount or a free appetizer. Go to KHOU.com for all that information. And now the most important question of all, what's for dessert?
We have information about this year's Black Restaurant Weeks on KHOU.com. It starts April 1st and ends April 10th. If you want to learn how to make some of those dishes yourself, our KHOU 11 team can show you how. Sit tight to learn how to make socket Timmy cake, collard greens, and etouffee.
This dessert is a staple in my household and here at the station.
I may have enjoyed a couple of slices.
Let me tell you, the socket Timmy cake is usually made in bundt cake form, but my mom loves to make it as a sheet cake. It feeds more people. But it's a yellow cake and it's usually baked up with a cinnamon and brown sugar swirl, and it's made super moist by sour cream.
So what's with the colorful name, you may ask? Well, the cake rose to popularity in the late 60s. Aretha Franklin's anthem, Respect, came out in 1967. Aretha sings at the end of the song for you to sack it to me, sack it to me, sack it to me, sack it to me, which means give it to me. The cake's thought to be so good, you'll beg the baker to sock you with another slice.
So if you want to know my mom's rockin' recipe, be sure to text the word recipe to 713-526-1111.
Rice, a staple in the motherland of Africa, finds its rightful place in African-American cuisine in a pillowy bed under smothered pork chops
or dished up in dirty rice.
Sounds so good, but it's jollof rice that celebrates cooking from West Africa with Maggi, Gnaw, and allspices paired with tomatoes.
Don't forget your mom's secret ingredient,
coconut milk.
Rice, by the way, was brought with slaves from Africa to the Americas. The grain carried on slave ships and harvested on plantations.
And hundreds of years later, jollof rice is still one of the most common dishes in West Africa and served mostly in Nigerian American homes like mine. To experience this flavor, try my family's recipe, my mom speaks act. Just text recipe to 713-526-1111.
Collard greens with smoky ham hocks in a pool of delicious pot liquor.
But no alcohol here. The pot liquor is the liquid released from the greens that creates an amazing broth with the smoky flavor of those ham hocks. Both were considered scraps from plantation kitchens and tossed out to slaves to eat.
You can smell the aroma from here. Today, it is the most celebrated dishes in African American cooking.
Stir up your own pot of collards. Text recipe to 713-526-1111 for my mother's recipe.
And do not forget to soak up the pot liquor with cornbread. That is what we call good eating.
African American food is just as diverse as its people. Creole cuisine celebrates Creoles of color from Southwest Louisiana who relocated to Houston.
They brought with them bold and flavorful boudin. That's a cooked sausage link stuffed with a mix of rice, pork sausage, or liver and spices.
Another favorite, etouffee, a roux-based sauce with the holy trinity of Creole cooking. That's onions, bell pepper, and celery, plus tomatoes and crawfish or shrimp served over a bed of rice. It is a Mardi Gras celebration in your mouth.
Les bon temps roulés.
For my etouffee recipe
and a bonus praline recipe,
text the word recipe to 713-526-1111.
Thank you so much for joining us for this KHOU 11 Plus special celebrating Black History Month. As always, you can find more information about all the stories included here on our website, and we'll be adding stories all through the month of February. You can find them at khou.com/ourstory, our history.